Welcome. I am Kathy Insel, Director of Innovations in Healthy Aging, and I'd like to thank you for joining us today for the final spring lecture of our free lecture series. We will pause our programming for the summer, but we'll be back in the fall with more exciting talks for you. I would like to give you a very brief overview of what our initiative is. So here you'll find a few fast facts, particularly in relationship to the state of Arizona and how quickly we are increasing the percentage of folks that we have who are 65 years of age and older. I want to share with you that our primary aim with the strategic initiative and innovations in healthy aging is to influence the critical factors that affect the health of our aging population. And how do we do that? We are trying by having a four-pronged sort of approach to doing this. We are trying to create an age-friendly University of Arizona so that you feel welcome on our campus, you feel welcome virtually, and we're extending out into our community. We also are trying to partner with developers of senior living communities and aging industry experts to reimagine senior living and aging in place. And we are expanding our capacity in research and discovery by focusing on aging and supporting those scientists who are working in the aging arena. And we also want to increase the workforce to meet both the opportunities and challenges of our aging population. I want to give you a heads up. We're going to be having another talk in September 21st on innovations in healthy aging that focus on awe walking in healthy aging. So it's called Big Smile, Small Self, Effects of Awe on Healthy Aging. And it will be done by an in-person forum, and hopefully we will also have a virtual option for that I will be talking with the group about after this talk. We know that awe is a positive emotion associated with wonder, creativity, and generosity. So this lecture will describe research on awe and its mental and physical health benefits, and it will summarize a study on awe walks that we conducted in older adults. So if you want to hear more about us, please go to the website, https://healthyaging.arizona.edu. And if you want to sign up for the mailing list, that's in here also, and it will appear in the chat so that you can open that up on your own time. I wanted to give you a little bit of an introduction to Lisa O'Neill, who will be our presenter moderator of our presentation today. Lisa is an Associate Director of Policy and Education in the Arizona Center on Aging. Now it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Dr. Michael Grandner. Dr. Grandner is a licensed clinical psychologist certified in behavioral sleep medicine. He is director of the Sleep and Health Research Program, and he is an associate professor of psychiatry, psychology, medicine, and clinical translational science at the University of Arizona College of Medicine here in Tucson. Welcome, Dr. Grandner.
Hello, thank you so much. And I appreciate this opportunity to talk to all you guys here. And I'm going to share some slides only because I'm an academic and I think I'm forbidden to speak without having slides. So let me share the PowerPoint here. So I'm going to be talking about sleep and healthy aging. First, I think it's important to take a step back. I think that when we're talking about sleep, what are we talking about? So I love this XKCD cartoon about sleep because it really highlights how we kind of take sleep for granted as a society, even though it's pretty amazing, especially when you're thinking about it from a neuroscience perspective. Where else can you be unconscious predictably, repeatedly, that can be reversible with the snap of a finger? You know, I mean, what other state of unconsciousness that has this total change in your body is that easily reversible, where all these amazing things happen? That's what we're talking about when we talk about sleep. Also, here's a quote from our recent paper in Science, where we're talking about what is the context of sleep here. And I like to start by talking about how sleep it's a non-negotiable biological state required for the maintenance of human life. Our need for sleep parallels that for air, food, and water. Why do we sleep? A lot of times reporters will ask me, is it true we don't yet know why humans need sleep? And I say, actually, we do know why humans need sleep. We need sleep because for the same reason we need air, because we're built for it. It's a fundamental part of our biology. It's not optional. Evolution decided this a long time ago. What they're really asking are, what are all the things that sleep is for? What are all the things that sleep does? And while it's true we don't know the end of it, and I feel like maybe we're just scratching the surface scientifically, I mean, to be honest, we could say the same thing about anything. We barely know how the brain works. Yet we still know a lot, but there's still much more left to learn. And that's not a knock on sleep. And so this is really important. Yet, and sleep is in this really important company. Yet nobody says things like, you know, breathing clean air is a luxury for people with just too much free time on their hands. Only lazy people breathe clean air. People don't say, when I retire, I'm going to drink clean water. I'm not going to drink that brown, dirty, stinky, polluted water. I mean, I'll do it for now, but like just because I don't have time for clean water. But when I retire, I'll drink non-polluted. Like, we don't say that. That would sound ridiculous, but we do say that about sleep. Why? It's because we live in a society that often sees sleep as an unproductive use of time. And there's nothing more un-American than unproductive use of time. So because of this has led to all kinds of societal pressures that devalue sleep. I love finding sleep images online. There's tons of them. I like this one because, first of all, look how much fun they're having, staying up late and doing all kinds of fun stuff. But they know that sleep isn't just a waste of time. It's actually going to impact their functioning the next day, tomorrow. And so more recently, we have people coming to recognize that, you know, maybe sleep really is important. Maybe that it is worth valuing. So this negative view of sleep we have in our society is unfortunate because, and I'm not going to show you data on all of these, just take my word for it or ask me. I'll send you the primary sources if you want them. But not getting enough healthy sleep is associated with more full and lost partial days at work, decreased productivity and efficiency, poor decision-making and memory problems, depression, anxiety, and even risk of suicide, weight gain, heart disease, diabetes, car crashes, accidents, injuries, errors, getting sick more often, requiring longer for recovery, decreased work-life balance, increased stress, increased alcohol, smoking, other substance use, and a shorter lifespan. I mean, and when you think about it, find me what you care about, tell me what you care about, and I will find a way that sleep is related to it because it's such a foundational part of our biology. It's related to all of these things. So maybe you don't care about heart disease and diabetes. Maybe you don't care about mental health. Maybe you want to just be more effective and efficient. Well, sleep is a pathway there. Maybe you just don't want to get sick. Maybe you want to protect your brain as you get older. Sleep could be your pathway there. So this is some US data showing that about half of the US population, this is across all age groups, is getting about 7 to 8 hours of sleep. I'll show you an age breakdown in a little bit. But what you can see is about a solid third of the population is in this 6 hours or fewer group where you'll see some of this increased risk that I'm going to talk about. There's also longer sleepers too. There's also, there is maybe such a thing as too much of a good thing. Longer sleep is also associated with not great outcomes. If you're sleeping 9, 10, 11 hours in the day as an adult, it might be a sign that something's up with your health. Here's the largest study that was ever done in terms of tracking sleep and longevity. And what you can see here, this y-axis is just increased likelihood of dying sooner. And you can see this U shape here where the people who got about 7 hours of sleep lived the longest, and there was this U-shaped relationship. The further you deviated, the more likely you were to die sooner. There have been over 50 studies now replicating this over 50 years. The first study doing this came out in 1964. And this has been replicated over and over and over again. It's extremely reliable. Why? Well, sleep is important for health. So here's some nationally representative data from a few 100,000 US adults looking to see asking people how much sleep do they get, and are they obese, do they have high blood pressure, and are they diabetic? And what you can see here is that people getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep have the lowest likelihood of having these things. Long sleepers have an elevated risk, 9+ hours, but short sleepers getting 5 or 6 hours, they're more likely to be obese, have high blood pressure, and have diabetes. And the very short sleepers, even less than 5 hours, even more so. You can see these things just sort of track with each other. They all go together. But it's not just that they overlap with each other cross-sectionally. What causes what? Well, so there've been a whole bunch of studies now that look where you take people who don't have these conditions, some sleep more, some sleep less, follow them over time, see who's more likely to develop these conditions. Well, those who get 6 hours of sleep or less are 55% more likely to become obese. They're 21% more likely to develop high blood pressure, and they're 33% more likely to develop diabetes over time. Weight management is especially sensitive to sleep. You're more likely to gain weight faster, and have trouble losing weight if you're not getting enough good sleep. It also impacts inflammation and hormone systems. Lack of sleep increases inflammation, and I don't know if I'm going to be talking about that a lot today, but I can get into that later if you want. And it leads you to get sicker, get sick more often, take longer to recover. Vaccines work worse if you're not sleeping well. Across the board, it's related to the immune system, and pretty much every hormone system is tied to sleep in some way. A little bit about mental health. The relationship between insomnia and depression is one of the most well-established findings in all sleep research. I would actually say in all of medicine. There are literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of papers documenting the association. There's an association between insomnia and depression is not in question. It's more about how can we prevent it, and in what ways. Poor sleep quality is also associated with every single symptom of depression. So here's some data we published a few years ago where we broke apart the PHQ-9 as a depression scale and looked at every single aspect of depression and which part of sleep disturbance was it related to, whether it was the sleep part of I'm just not sleeping well at night, the daytime part of sleep problems, which is my sleep problems are impacting my ability to function during the day. That was actually arguably more important. And the perception symptoms. So this is whether or not I'm sleeping poorly, whether or not it's impacting my daytime, I'm just not satisfied, or I might be worried about my sleep, or I'm distressed about my sleep. Those are also associated with these things. And we did the same thing with anxiety as well. Every aspect of anxiety was related to sleep. These are all independent controlling for each of the other ones. So we think of sleep as a biological process, but it's not really just a biological process. So Simon Williams is a sociologist based in the UK who writes about sleep from a sociology perspective. And here's a quote from one of his books, and it's, when we sleep, where we sleep, and with whom we sleep are all important markers or indicators of social status, privilege, prevailing power relations. And I think this quote is extremely important because it reminds us that sleep might be important for our biology, but it's not just biological. So this is from that science paper we published last year, where we spell out this model, the social ecological model of sleep health. And so here you have the sleeping person here. And you can see sleep is related to, up through the brain, it's associated with mental health, and behavioral health, and cognitive health. And it's also related to cardiovascular, metabolic, and immune health. So this is the whole constellation of health outcomes associated with sleep. And so what drives sleep? And think about your own sleep, your people's genetics, their age, sex and gender, your race, ethnicity, your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors. That's what drives your sleep, your choices. When you're going to go to sleep tonight, those are all choices you're going to make. However, this is not where the story ends. This is embedded within a social level, your neighborhood, your work, your family, culture, your own social network, socioeconomics, and feelings of safety. I mean, many people, their sleep schedule, especially before they're retired, is mostly driven by work. Doesn't have anything to do with their genetics or their age or, their own attitudes. If work tells you this is when you show up, this is when you're sleeping and when you're waking up. And then there's also this societal level that this is embedded within too. Things like globalization, 24/7 society, technology, the fact that so many people sleep with one of these within arm's reach all the time. I mean, who did that a generation ago? Nobody. It didn't exist. And it's not a coincidence, it's that society changed. And so if we're going to understand a person's sleep, we have to understand the context. And if you see in background, you see the sun. And when I asked the artist to draw it, I asked them to make it so that you couldn't tell if the sun was rising or setting. And that was to talk about the circadian 24-hour process that we all live within, that our bodies are working within. That circadian rhythms are sort of the backdrop of all of this as well. So on to aging. So I rambled enough about sleep in general and how it's related to health. So let's talk a little bit about sleep and healthy aging. So I'm going to talk about sleep across the lifespan, sleep disorders risk across the lifespan, subjective sleep quality across the lifespan, and sleep resilience across the lifespan. So this is a perfect night of sleep. This is a person that would never exist. It's too perfect, but this is what you have. You've got these different stages of sleep. You have stage 1, which is very light sleep. It's very light and shallow. It's mostly just a transition stage. If you wake someone up from stage 1 sleep, they'll say, "Oh, I wasn't asleep," and you'll say, "Yes, you were." But it's very light. Then stage 2 is it's kind of light sleep too. This is sort of regular vanilla standard sleep. This is about half of the night is going to be in stage 2. Most of the work of sleep is done in stage 2. Stage 3 is more of a deep sleep. This is where the thinking parts of your brain are largely offline. You're very relaxed. You're doing a lot of building and repairing in the body during this time. This is when a lot of the immune system work is happening. This is the only time your body secretes growth hormone is during slow wave sleep, which is stage 3. Then you have REM. So you go through the stages, then you go up to REM. REM sleep is very light, actually. It's actually not that hard to wake someone up from REM sleep. This is where our dreams and nightmares occur. You're very relaxed in deep sleep, but actually your muscles are more relaxed in REM sleep, even though your brain is super active, because you're actually paralyzed in REM sleep. In deep sleep, you're very relaxed. In REM sleep, you're paralyzed. You might get little twitches here and there, but you're not able to move. Your brain is very active though. And you get these cycles during the night. You can see the beginning of the night, you drop down from awake, skip REM into light sleep, down into deep sleep, and then you cycle back up. You'll notice the deep sleep is largely in the beginning of the night, mostly in the first couple hours. And then you'll see the end of the night is where you have the longer REM episodes. That's why if you have a really long and involved dream, it probably happened in the second half of the night, because that's when you get the longer REM episodes. Now, this is a perfect night of sleep. Now let's compare what this would look like in a young person versus an older person. So here's taken from another paper where you can see, look, here's that same sort of pattern. Now look at the same thing as somebody's older. A few things you'll notice. One, there's a lot more wake during the night here. This is normal. This is not harmful. This is not dangerous. This is what just sleep looks like as we get older. It's a little more broken up. There's less deep sleep here. It's a little more shallow. You have a lot more stage 2 and stage 1 than you had before, and you still have REM episodes. Maybe they're a little more broken up. And so this is what normal sleep looks like in a younger person versus an older person. So this is data taken from about 60 years worth of laboratory studies where they looked at what do typical adults have across the night. And you could see, kids have a little more light sleep, but then, mostly levels out. And then as people get very old, their sleep gets lighter, but it starts drifting up even here after around age 70. Stage 2 sleep, which is sort of makes up about half the night, is pretty stable across the lifespan. Slow wave sleep, which is the stage 3 deep sleep, kids have a lot of it because remember, this is where growth hormone is secreted. This is where growing happens. But then by the time you're an adult, it levels off, but that starts decreasing actually once people hit around age 50, 60. It starts tapering off and people have less of this deep sleep across the night. REM sleep is actually pretty solid. Younger people have a little more REM, but it mostly stabilizes across the lifespan. Sleep latency is the length it takes you to fall asleep. It might drift up a little bit as people get older, but not a ton. But WASO, this stands for wake after sleep onset. This is those awakenings in the middle of the night. This is what really increases with age. Normal, this is normal sleep. This is what to expect when you're expecting to get older. This is what happens with wake time during the night. So here's some data from about 1 million people tracked with wearables. When they tracked wake time during the night by age in men and women. So this is the percent of people who had a lot of wake during the night. Just went up as people got older. This is pretty typical with age. Another thing that happens with age is something about the biological night. So everyone has a part of the night where their body wants to sleep. Little kids, they go to bed very early and they wake up early. Then as they get older and become teenagers, they want to stay up later and wake up later. And then, when people who are adults have what we would call sort of a normal night, but we only call it normal because we're the ones who get to define that. A teenager wouldn't call a 50-year-old sleep schedule normal, they'd call it early, but we call it normal. And then as people get older, it might drift a little earlier. So here's some data that actually charts that out across the lifespan. So this is how early or late your biological night is. You can see kids are pretty early, but then as they go through adolescence, they drift later and later and later and later and later. Peak in the early 20s in terms of a late biological night, and then it sort of starts drifting a little earlier and earlier. They never get to the point where they were when they were kids, but here you have, middle-aged and older people starting to get into an earlier sleep phase. This is just what's normal. So this means a 10-year-old looks at the clock and sees midnight. Their body says, oh my gosh, it's 2 in the morning, it's so late. A 20-year-old looks at the clock and says midnight. Their body says, oh, it's only 10 p.m. It's not that late. And then where you have after age 40, you look at midnight, you see midnight. But as you get older, that might get earlier and earlier. So this is sort of the normal process. Other things change in terms of circadian rhythms as you get older. Melatonin is a hormone secreted by your pineal gland in your brain. The main thing melatonin does is it tells your body it's nighttime. It's not a sleeping pill, it's not a sedative, it's a hormone that tells your body it's nighttime. So people who take melatonin, it's telling your body it's nighttime. But you produce less melatonin often as you get older. And so as you see people as they get older, their melatonin secretion during the night might go down. So for some people taking melatonin at night, it's not as a sedative, it's essentially a hormone replacement to help improve that nighttime signal in your body to improve your ability to get sort of healthy sleep. So sometimes melatonin is helpful. Also, some medications that people take reduce natural melatonin, like beta blockers for blood pressure. In terms of how much sleep people get by age, do older people sleep less? Actually, not really. When you divide up people by, so here's the very short sleepers getting 4 hours or less. Here's the 5-6 hour sleepers. Here's the 7 to 8 hour sleepers. Here's the 9 or more hour sleepers. You can see here, this is 16 to 17-year-olds. These are adolescents. They need more sleep. They're more likely to be longer sleepers. These are kids who are still in school. Almost none of them should be getting 4 hours of sleep, but this is still not enough. This is nationally representative data from the CDC. You can see, starting at age 18, about 55% of the US population is getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep across all the age groups. What's changing, and look, there's about 4 to 5% getting the 4 hours or less in that extreme short group. What's changing is the short sleepers and the long sleepers. So this is 30 to 65, this is prime working age. Well, what happens when people are employed? They're more likely to become a short sleeper, less likely to become a long sleeper because they don't got time. Then all of a sudden they retire, the short sleeper number drops and the longer sleeper number increases. And so now that people don't have to wake up for work and can presumably do what they want, or they might have more control of their schedule, or also they might have more health conditions that lead them to stay in bed longer. So this is why long sleep might not necessarily be a good thing, because it might be a marker of another health condition. Sleep apnea goes up with age until about 65, and it sort of levels off, but especially from 35 to 65, you have a sharp increase in rates of sleep apnea, which is highly prevalent in the population. Here's the best data I could find, looking at men 30 to 49 and then 50 to 70, and the same for women. And what you can see here is body mass index. So this is under 25 is normal weight, 25 to 30 is overweight, but fine, but not obese. 30 to 40 is obese, and more than 40 is morbidly obese. And what you can see here is sleep apnea follows body mass. So as you have a higher BMI, as you gain weight, your likelihood of sleep apnea goes up, whether you're male or female, it doesn't matter. You have more in men than women, but it's still tied to weight in women. And it's way more common than people think. Look, men, 50 to 70, they're not even obese, nor they're not even overweight. You're talking about possibility of 1 out of 5 men over age 50 who aren't even overweight. Once you're overweight, that goes up to a third. Once you hit obesity, more than half of those men with a BMI over 30 have at least mild sleep apnea. And in women too, normal weight women who aren't even overweight, you're talking about maybe 1 in 10 women might have at least mild sleep apnea. Doctors don't discuss this with you, but if you wake up feeling tired, if you wake up a lot during the night, if you're feeling fatigued, maybe it's actually untreated sleep apnea. It's way more common, especially in older adults, than people think. Nocturia, this is waking up in the night to go to the bathroom. This is some data we looked at using some nationally representative data. And men and women, this isn't just a problem in men. This is for men and women, this is an issue. And what you can see here is that there's a key inflection point around age 50, where you have this increase in number of times waking up to go to the bathroom at night. Is it the case that you have to go to the bathroom more, or is it the case that your wake after sleep onset is increasing and you have to go to the bathroom because you're awake, or you wake up because you have to go to the bathroom? Actually, the data is suggesting that it might be the former. It's not that you have to go to the bathroom more and that's why you're waking up. It's that you have all these natural awakenings and your body's like, well, you're awake anyway, might as well go to the bathroom. It looks like this is the same thing that happens with hot flashes, where if you look at the tracings of women having hot flashes during sleep, when you study them in the lab, what looks like happens is the awakening precedes the hot flash. So they have the hot flash. It's not that the hot flash wakes them up. It's that the awakening triggers the hot flash. It's a little counterintuitive, but that's why I wanted to show this. It looks like there's this inflection point around age 50, and that this is an issue for both men and women, actually. Nocturnal leg cramps are also more common than people tend to think. Again, you have this inflection point where the rates start doubling at around age 50 in the population. And in this paper, we looked at what it's related to, and it seems to be correlated with a lot of other health conditions and sleep conditions. So, might not be worth totally ignoring either. Insomnia also goes up with age. Here's rates of insomnia in men and women. And you can see as people get older, their rates of insomnia go up. But this is complicated. So this is where we're going to start talking about sleep and resilience. There's some recent evidence that suggests that getting older doesn't necessarily mean sleeping poorly, at least based on your subjective estimate of sleep. So this is the oldest study I could find that really documented this well. It was in Italy, and they looked at what they called an elderly group and what they called a younger group. And they asked, how satisfied are you that you're getting enough sleep? Actually, it was the older group that said that they were more likely to be satisfied that they're getting enough sleep. And this is, yes, they were still waking up more during the night. Yes, their sleep was still more shallow, but they actually rated their sleep as better than the younger group. If this is the case, our approach to sleep across the lifespan would have to shift dramatically. Instead of just looking at awakening, we'd have to look at how people rate their sleep. So The reason I found that is because we about 10 years ago, we documented this finding that hadn't really been reported in the literature before, and I thought it was wrong. But it's since been replicated a bunch of times, and I'll show you some examples of that, where what we found was that when we looked at a sample of 150,000 people across the US, and we tracked how many people say they have a problem with their sleep at least 3 nights a week, a problem. Not saying, do you wake up, how much, not asking for the symptom, but just saying, is your sleep a problem for you? At least 3 nights a week. And we tracked that by age and sex. This is what we saw. So in men, it's, it trends downward, but it stays kind of low. You have actually the highest rate is in the 18 to 24-year-olds of people who said, yes, sleep is a problem for me. Then it ticks up. Here, working age, this might be untreated sleep apnea or something. And then it sort of levels out at 14, 15%. It's a slight uptick. There's not a whole lot of variability across age, but it's a slight decrease trend. Women actually have a pronounced trend. First of all, the linear trend is actually a decline over age, but here you have the rate of saying sleep is a problem was the highest in, again, the 18 to 24-year-olds. I'm sure people in their 60s and 70s might look back at their 18 to 24 years and think, wow, I used to sleep great. But don't tell an 18 to 24-year-old that, because they don't believe you. And so then you look what happens starting, around 40 to 60, you have this uptick in sleep problems, peaking here in around 50 to 54, and then sleep problems start dropping off again. So this is not what we expected. You expected them to go the other direction. And then when we asked about fatigue separately, daytime fatigue, this is the same thing. With men, it's pretty flat. Until age 70, it starts ticking up. In women, actually, this hump here is actually relatively small compared to the sleep disturbance. And the women who report the most fatigue are under 35. Those are the women who say they're the most fatigued. Until you hit age 70, and then it starts ticking back up again. This is just the report. So then what we did is like, well, maybe this has to do with health issues or income and socioeconomics and stuff. So when we controlled for all of that, this is what we found. Here's the sleep disturbance finding. This is the slope of the men and women. The lines are right on top of each other. It's actually both men and women have the same slope of a decreased trend. All of these stars mean they have higher reports of sleep disturbance than the 80-year-olds. So the 80-year-olds is this line, and everything else. So there's no group that reported sleep disturbance less than the 80-year-olds. We were very surprised. And you can see, like, it's the 18 to 24-year-olds, especially in men, that report the most. And in women, you have this uptick here. But once they hit 65, actually, they tend not to report as many problems after you control for things like their health, depression, medical care, all that other stuff. And when you look at the fatigue, it's even more stark. That rise after age 70 disappeared. That was health. That was depression. That was access to health care. So aging is not associated with increased fatigue on its own. It's only because of these things down here. So this was, and I'm spending some time on this because this was shocking. I thought this was wrong. Like, this was not what we expected to find. We expected it to go in the other direction. And like, no age group is less likely to report sleep disturbance or fatigue than 80-year-olds. Like, we expected that, well, we know sleep is more broken up. We know they have more of these issues. But it turns out, getting older, aging is not a degenerative disease. Aging is just aging. With aging comes things like resilience, comes perspective, comes strategies, all of these things. So when I first found this, I went to my old graduate school advisor, who was retired at the time. So, he fit in that age group, and he was a sleep scientist who studied aging. And like, the whole time, we worked together, we looked about the sleep problems associated with aging. So I showed him these data, and he looks at me and he says, well, now that I'm retired, I've got more aches and pains. I take some pills at night, and I do wake up more during the night, but I'll have to get up early to go to work. And, with everything else going on, it doesn't really get in the way of me being able to do what I need to do. So that's fine. It's like, there's your data. Like that's how you should interpret it. So I think he's right. It's not just about that sleep might get shallower as we get older, but if it's a problem for you, it might be a fixable problem. So here's one replication of it where it's with a different item. This was how many nights a week do you feel like you don't get enough sleep? Same line, unadjusted and adjusted. This is just the line. Adjusted means, again, after controlling for gender, education, income, access to care, mood, mental health, physical health, all that other stuff. Didn't really change the slope too much. If anything, it made it a little steeper. And then it levels out at 65. I mean, it was again, most people would think as you get older, you feel like you're not getting enough sleep. It's actually the opposite. 65-year-olds feel like they get enough sleep on average, or they're the most likely to say that they feel like they get enough sleep. This is the same curve looking at sleep debt. So when they ask people how much sleep they feel like they need to function well and how much sleep they got, levels out at about 65. You know, the highest is in the younger adults. Younger adults feel like they need way more than they get. That might be the source of the issue. It's not just that their sleep isn't, more solid than as it's older. It's just with all the pressures leading them to sleep less, they're not getting the sleep that they need. Whereas as you get older, that actually gets a little closer. A little bit more about how much sleep. So this is some data. This is also nationally representative data looking at perceived cognitive decline, showing that people who get about 7 hours of sleep are less likely to say, whether they're men or women, they were the least likely to say they're experiencing cognitive decline from one year to the next. But what you can see here is as people get older, that relationship gets weaker. But that makes sense, because if you're 70 and experiencing cognitive decline, how you've been sleeping lately is probably not the main cause. There's all kinds of other things that can cause cognitive decline in the 70s. But if you're in your 40s and 50s and you're experiencing cognitive decline, you really shouldn't be. There's something is artificially making your brain worse. And sleep is so closely tied to brain health. By not sleeping, that's what's increasing your likelihood of that perceived cognitive decline. So here's a recent study looking at how changes in sleep over time lead to impaired brain health and how that interacts with insomnia. So one thing you can see here is, so as people get older, so this is just years, a 10-year span, you're looking at cognitive function, and let's see, so this is difficulty initiating sleep. This is waking up during the night. This is waking up too early and not being able to get back to sleep. And this is not waking up feeling rested. And you can see here that as people get older, sort of their cognitive function just naturally declines. But it's worse in the people who have more trouble falling asleep. It's worse in the people who have more of these early morning awakenings, and it's worse in people whose sleep isn't restorative. The awakenings during the night didn't seem to matter too much. But this is that interaction. This is that, aging causes these problems, but aging with sleep problems, you'll look worse. Here's a study looking at hippocampal volume loss. So the hippocampus is the part of your brain that plays some of the most important roles in memory. So this is why it's such a focus of neuroscience research, is because memory loss seems to target hippocampus especially, and hippocampus plays such a big role. Hippocampus, by the way, sounds like a fancy word. It's just the Greek word for seahorse, just seahorse. It's the seahorse because it's kind of seahorse-shaped structure in the brain, so they called it that. We might as well just call it a seahorse. So seahorse loss in your brain. So this is what happens over time in people with sleep problems versus without sleep problems as they track people over 5 years. There might be slight declines in, there's no decline in a 20-year-old. There's, not much decline in a 40-year-old, but you start seeing decline in 60-year-olds and then especially 80-year-olds. But look at the slope of those lines in people with those sleep problems. Another aspect of resilience over time is that as you get older, the relationship between sleep and health might actually be weaker. So sleep is important for things like brain health, And it looks like sleep in an older adult might be important for brain health, but it might not be important for everything. So here's a 3D figure showing the three-way relationship between age, how much you're sleeping, and your body mass and weight. Because remember, we were talking about how short sleepers are more likely to gain weight and gain weight faster. And by the way, this is controlling for all of these other things. Now, the cool thing about this image is usually in journals, the only people who have color figures are like neuroimaging people and like mapping people. So we got a color image that looked all fancy in a journal, but it's really hard to read. I mean, you're gonna like change this curve over time. So what we did is we actually broke up this curve to make it more understandable. This is much easier. This is fancier and sciencier looking, but this is actually more interpretable. So here's the relationship between hours of sleep by looking at the different groups across age and body mass. So here you have 20-year-olds. You can see the long sleepers have the lowest BMIs and the very short sleepers have the highest BMIs. So remember, younger people need more sleep anyway. So 9 hours or more really isn't long, it probably isn't really long sleep in a young person. That's actually good. But then you could see as you get older, there's still a risk associated with short, but the benefits of long sleep sort of go away once you hit age 30. And by the time you're 50, it's actually a U-shaped relationship where both short and long sleep have higher BMIs. Then as you get older, once you hit like 65, all of these lines are sort of collapsing on each other and showing that actually the relationship gets weaker as you get older. I mean, you still have the super short sleepers having some elevated risk here, but you know, except for that extremely sleep deprived group, you know, mostly it doesn't matter. We saw the same thing with high blood pressure, where this is data from about 750,000 people, and we looked at hours of sleep relative to high blood pressure. This is just the p-values. So this is just looking at the relationships of all these analyses. So gray means there was no significant relationship. And what you can see here is short sleepers and to some degree long sleepers are more likely to have high blood pressure. If you're 30 or under, long sleep really doesn't seem to be carrying much in the way of risk here, but that's probably because, you know, this isn't really dangerous in younger, you know, relatively younger people. This isn't really a marker of anything bad. But, you know, working age and older people, you know, longer sleep is bad until you hit about 75, 80. Long sleep doesn't really seem to be carrying much risk. And short sleep, the risk, again, right around age 70, you know, being a 5 and 6 hour sleeper doesn't really seem to be carrying risk for high blood pressure like it did when, you know, in other age groups. The extremely short group, maybe, people getting 3-4 hours a night, you know, that's not good for you. 5-6 hours, you know, here it's not good for you. As you get older, you know, maybe it's not that big of a deal. You know, if you have high blood pressure and you're 75 years old, how you're sleeping now probably isn't the main driver of that. You have a whole lifetime of reasons why you're there. This was one of my favorite studies on sleep and aging, where it was a sleep deprivation study. They had younger people and older people. They asked them to rate their performance after sleep deprivation. It was about the same. Their alertness levels were sort of about the same, but their actual performance was totally different. Where the older people actually slightly overestimated, slightly overestimated how impaired they were. They thought they were here. Their performance their performance impairment was actually down here. This is the decrement, so higher means worse. So they thought they were doing worse than they really were. Where the younger people were way off. They thought that they were about the same, but they were totally impaired. Sorry, maybe you can't see my cursor that I'm trying to show you the image here. But what you can see is that the self-evaluation of performance was about the same in older and younger people, but the older people actually slightly overestimated how impaired they were, slightly. The younger people totally underestimated how impaired they were. They thought they were just as fine as the older person, where they were falling apart. They didn't know it. They had no idea. And this is something you see in the lab all the time in most studies, that when you sleep deprive people, they have no idea how impaired they are. But it turns out as you get older, you might be more resilient to sleep loss. So, all right. So with the time we've got left, and I want to leave plenty of time for questions, but what I'm going to do for maybe the next 5-10 minutes or so is talk about, so all right, so if everyone's on board with sleep being important for health, what do we do about it? So I'm going to talk about a few things. First of all is developing a nighttime routine. A lot of people say, I get into bed and I can't fall asleep because my mind just keeps going. My mind won't stop when I get into bed. Maybe my mind is just very overactive. And I like to say, there's nothing wrong with your mind. Your mind is totally fine. That's like saying, I'm in my car, I want it to stop at the stop sign, but it keeps going even after I want it to stop. And so then when I ask them, okay, when did you start braking? And they'll say, well, I started slowing down about 2 millimeters before the stop sign, and I was hoping I'd stop right there. It's like, well, the fact that you're moving into the intersection has nothing to do with your car. Your car is working fine, brakes are fine, street is fine, stop sign didn't come too early, you just didn't prepare. And so, of course, if you're going, doing stuff, you know, or distracting yourself, watching TV, like you're going, and then all of a sudden you get into bed and you think your brain is a light switch, it's not. You didn't give it the chance to wind down and calm down and process everything it needs to process. So you get into bed and all of a sudden your brain's like, okay, now I have your attention. Here's all the things that I need to process before I'm ready to go to sleep. You could have done that already if you're going to do it anyway. So how do you develop a good nighttime routine? I think an effective bedtime routine has 5 key elements. Number 1, it has to be repeatable and reliable. You can use this to train yourself. So if you can do the same thing every night, it doesn't have to be intense and long, but it has to be something that you can take with you every night. Where, you know, if you're someone who travels a lot, make it something you can travel with. If it's something that, if you're in the same place, have it be a repeatable pattern. Do everything in the same order. Have it be the right length. You don't want it too long. The nighttime routine will start training you that sleep is coming if you do it the same way every time. But if it's too long, it's actually harder to learn. A key here, and probably the most important element, is that it has to include nighttime signals. Tell your brain sleep is coming. That means slow down. That means start dimming lights. You know, keep it safe, but you want lights, especially in the yellow-orange spectrum. That sends more of a nighttime and dusk signal. Blue, green, and bright white lights send a daytime signal. You want to cut as many of those as you can, or use blue blocking glasses. You want to not be running around. You want to not be doing stuff that's exciting. You want to send that nighttime signal, and you want to calm both your mind and your body. For some people, they get very uncomfortable at night, so they need to relax or stretch or do so, or breathe or something. For some people, it's their mind, where their mind is going, and they need to mentally relax or write down lists or do whatever you need to do. And for some people, it's both. And then finally, it rolls downhill. So this is a metaphor they use with kids, like when you're developing bedtime routines for toddlers, they say, make it roll downhill. What that means is, you don't start downstairs, go upstairs, go back down to the kitchen, then go up to the bathroom, then go down for a glass of water, and then go back upstairs to your room, and then you're in the bed. You don't go in and out and all over the place. You go in one direction. You move from one floor to the next. You move from one room to the next, and when you're in the bathroom, you do all the bathroom stuff. Then you move here, and you end with you in your room in bed. And this process becomes part of what your brain starts associating with sleep coming. Once the process starts, if it becomes unreliable and choppy, it's harder for your body to learn it. The next thing I want to talk to you about is something called stimulus control. This is probably the most powerful technique for sleep. Everyone should be doing this. This alone will outperform sleeping pills a lot of the time for insomnia. But it's super safe and it's super powerful. It's easy to talk about, but it might be hard to put in practice. What stimulus control means is that you're taking control of the bed in the bedroom as a stimulus for sleep. You want the bed to trigger sleep. Instead, what happens is the bed either triggers nothing because you do all kinds of stuff there, like thinking and tossing and turning or reading or watching TV, that getting in bed, your brain doesn't be like, oh, I'm going to sleep here. It's, oh, I'm going to lie awake here, or I might be stressed here, or whatever. It's not an unconscious, automatic assumption, I'm going to fall asleep soon. That's what you want. But instead, all these other things are happening in bed. And what's even worse, the bed can actually become the dentist chair, where you get in there and you start stressing out, even if nothing even happened to you yet, because you're anticipating what negative things that are going to happen, which cause the very activation that you're trying to avoid. So what are all the different things that people do in bed? I mean, you talk to people, there's all kinds of stuff that people do in bed. And the problem is, when there's a million options of what to do, none of them get trained. So the bed doesn't become a signal for anything. But what's worse is sometimes certain things start taking over, like thinking and worrying, and then sleep becomes less predictable. Sleep isn't the predictable thing that happens. It's thinking and worrying that becomes the predictable thing that happens. So what you like, the main thing you need to do is you need to get all this stuff out. You start with the easy ones, and then, you know, what we work with in clinic is we work on some of the harder ones, how to get this thinking and worrying and all the stuff out of the bed. And then what happens is that it becomes a much less of a question, and sleep can take on a much larger and more central role. Sleep can be the automatic response. Sex is fine too, that can stay in bed. That's usually not the problem. And then I want to end with this idea of sleep hygiene. So sleep hygiene is not sleep medicine. These are just tips. These won't cure a sleep problem. It's like brushing your teeth. Everyone should brush their teeth. It's good for you. It'll fix small problems. It'll prevent problems. But you can't brush your way out of braces. So sleep hygiene isn't going to fix everything, but it's still good and it's still useful. And I also talk about it as sleep hygiene commandments, because when you Google this stuff online, they treat it as if they're these commandments for healthy sleep, and if you violate any of them, you're going to have bad sleep and you're a bad person for doing any of this. And like, that's not true. They're just guidelines. They're just suggestions. They're not necessary to have. You can have perfectly fine sleep even if your sleep isn't perfect and you don't do everything perfectly. It's fine. So the whole commandments thing is a joke. Like, they're not commandments. They're just suggestions. So the first sleep commandment is thou shalt keep a regular schedule, clap of thunder. So regularity is good for sleep. It helps train. If you want to get hungry at noon for lunch, start eating lunch around noon. Your body will start learning the time. If you start doing things regularly, you can program them in. Your body loves patterns. Thou shalt exercise regularly, but not too late at night, clap of thunder. Exercise is great for sleep. The too late at night thing is mostly overblown. I put that in there on purpose because you'll read about this online. Don't worry about it. If you're exercising super late at night and can't fall asleep, stop. Don't do that. If you're exercising at night and fall asleep fine, it's fine. Like, don't worry about it. Get light during the day, avoid it at night. You talked about light sending a daytime signal. It's great if you get it in the morning. That can set your whole clock for the day and help your body predict when nighttime is going to come. If you send a bright daytime morning signal, it'll know a certain number of hours later to expect sleep. And so you'll be set up for it. Keep your bedroom cool, dark, and comfortable, not rocket science. Don't consume excessive foods and liquids in the evening. I mean, also not rocket science. If you eat really heavy meals, you're more likely to get reflux. Spicy foods can raise your body temperature, make it harder to fall asleep. Too much liquid in the evening, you'll wake up to go to the bathroom more. I mean, everyone knows that stuff. Put down screens when we're getting ready for bed. We talked about screens and how they can not only be a source of light, but they're also an important source of distraction and mental activation. And that can keep you up. Don't ingest caffeine, nicotine, and alcohol at night. Alcohol is probably the most used sleep drug in the world. It can help you fall asleep faster, but it makes your sleep shallower and causes more awakenings during the night. Nicotine also is a stimulant. You shouldn't smoke anyway, but it makes sleep worse. And caffeine can impact your sleep even 10 to 12 hours after taking it sometimes. Some people drink caffeine and sleep fine. Some of them are super sensitive. Don't go to bed angry, worried, or upset. Be angry, worried, or upset. I don't care. Just don't do it in bed. Stimulus control. Get all the negative stuff out of bed. Don't make the bed be the negative place. Thou shalt get rid of the clock. Some people don't need to worry about this. Others do. Some people are obsessing over the clock, and it causes stress. So especially if you wake up in the middle of the night and first thing you do is you look at the clock, why? What's it going to tell you that you need to know? If you need to wake up at a certain time, set an alarm. If you don't hear an alarm, who cares what time it is? Go back to sleep. Stimulus control says if you can't get back to sleep, get up. Doesn't matter what time it is, and then go back to sleep later when you're ready. But you shouldn't be laying in bed awake anyway, no matter what time it is. So people who worry about the clock, they should turn it around. And thou shalt not nap too long or too late during the day. I put this one last because napping gets a bad rap for sleep. You'll see all these articles about napping being bad. It's mostly because people who nap a lot have bad sleep at night. So they're super sleepy during the day because they're hungry for sleep during the day because they're not getting what they need. So they're starved for it. The napping wasn't the problem. It was the poor sleep at night that was the problem. But if you're sleeping mostly okay and want to make up for something with a little bit of a nap during the day, naps are like snacks. Light snack during the day and between meals might keep you going, good for energy, and might stave off hunger to make you able to eat more healthy meals, as opposed to being starving later. But if you have a snack that's too big or too close to dinner, it'll ruin your appetite. So don't do that. Don't nap too long or too late in the day. So thanks a lot. Hopefully some of this stuff was helpful, and we've got a little bit of time to address any questions.
This was great. Thank you so much. So much information. If anyone has any questions, please enter them in the chat and we will go over them. One of the questions that is up, have you noticed that the pandemic has impacted a lot of people's sleep? Do you hear that frequently these days?
Yeah, clinically, there were 4 patterns that really showed up through the pandemic. One was people who are staying up later because their schedules were a little more under their control, and that's what their bodies wanted. We also saw a lot of people who were waking up more during the night with more stress. We saw people who had much more vivid dreams. We also saw people whose schedules were just more disrupted because everything got thrown off. I mean, now things are mostly back to normal. We actually had a paper that came out where we studied data from 6 major US cities tracking through the early months of the pandemic, from like March to like January to like April, May, June of 2020. And we showed that, like, on average, actually people were getting slightly more sleep by staying in later, but some people were sleeping less. And the ones who were able to get a little more sleep, even if they were getting 5-10 minutes more sleep than usual, actually when we tracked their Fitbit data, we showed that it actually was correlating with better heart rate. It was even that slight change in sleep was causing a slight benefit to their health. So yeah, I mean, that was sort of. But one thing I do want to say is people had all kinds of different reactions to the pandemic. The pandemic may have been universal, but people's responses to sleep haven't. Right now, things are mostly seem normalized, but maybe a little bit of flexibility built into the system is a good thing. Too much flexibility maybe was not a good thing. But a little bit more flexibility than we had before. Hopefully we learn from that, because it seems to be good.
Are you able to make up sleep deficiency? Like, you hear people all the time say,
Yeah.
I'll sleep more on the weekend.
Yeah, so yes and no. The no part is when people say, well, is it okay how much sleep do I need on the weekend to make up for sleep depriving myself during the week? And to me, that sounds like, how much salad do I need to eat on the weekend to make up for eating nothing but cheeseburgers and pizza all week? Like, well, you're still eating cheeseburgers and pizza all week. Like, that's not good for you. Like, you're spending all weekend eating salads is better. I mean, if you spend all weekend also eating cheeseburgers and pizza, that would be even worse. But it's not like a bank account where I spent this many hours here and I'm going to make up for it here. It's more like diet, where it's like, if you have a really unhealthy diet, a few days a week of a super healthy diet's better than not, but that's not what's going to fix things. What's going to fix things is getting back to balance. So a lot of people say they don't have time for sleep. So in my research, one of the things I'm really looking at is this idea of control over sleep. People feel out of control of their sleep. And actually, maybe we need to teach people to control their sleep. For example, we did this work in the student athletes. So student athletes have a big problem with sleep because, their kids, they stay up late. Homework is due at midnight on these online portals. So guess when it gets turned in? At 11:59. So everyone's up till midnight doing homework. I mean, they should change that at the university, but that's a whole other story. And they usually have to get up really early to train and practice before class. So asking a student athlete to go to bed an hour earlier is asking them to give up the 1 hour in the day they actually have any control over. That's theirs. That's their time. And so instead of asking them to give up their time, we did this program and we asked them, well, what if I could give you more time? What if I could, what if you had an exercise routine that could improve your athletic performance by 10, 20%? Would you do it? And what if your grades would go up, your relationships would get better? Would it be worth it to you to invest that time in it? And they said yes. And we increased their sleep time by over an hour, but actually about most of that time they were already spending in bed anyway, using things like stimulus control. and helping them choose bedtime routines and like working with some of the stuff, we got people to optimize the sleep they were getting. So they were actually sleeping more, but they weren't spending a whole lot more time to do it. They were more efficient with it. So that's what I want to say is balance is possible. It's just, we don't, you know, as a society, we don't really know how. There's not a lot of solutions out there. But that's what I would say. Don't try and binge and purge yourself. You know, don't try and be, you know, pendulum swinging back and forth. That's instability. The body doesn't like instability. The body likes balance. Even if it's a little less, it's probably, there is data that shows that if you're getting less sleep, if you're sleeping in on the weekends, it's better than not sleeping in on the weekends. You will live longer if you sleep in on the weekends than if you didn't. But it's even better if you didn't have to, I guess is my point.
Well, that's a great way to end it. We're out of time for questions. Unfortunately, it was so informative. Thank you so much for passing along all
You're
your.
very welcome. Thank you.
This was a great lecture. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their week and Memorial Day weekend.
We hope you do too. Thank you everyone for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you next time.